Thanks for joining us Behind the Frontline, a podcast providing timeless solutions to everyday workforce and workplace challenges. Frontline Training Solutions is an express employment professionals company, strategically placed between the workplace and the workforce with professionals standing by, ready to combat your unique challenges. Learn more about what we do at frontlineon.com. Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Frontline at Frontline Training Solutions. I'm Nic Dampier. I'm the creative director here, and I'm joined in the studio with Nathan Leaman, who's president of Frontline Training Solutions, and also Kaylee Cooper, who's our senior HR and operational consultant. See, I did it right.
Got it.
I nailed it that time. We're going to pretend like this is the first time I've tried that. So we're joined with Kaylee today, who is newer to the Frontline team, but not necessarily newer to our companies or what we do. So Kaylee, I was hoping you could just kind of introduce our listeners today and some of your background.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Kaylee Cooper. I joined the team here with the Express Employment Professionals family of companies back in March of 2020, which some of you may remember. That is certainly an interesting time to make a career change. And I joined the team initially as a skilled trades recruiter. Over the course of my career, the last several years, I've kind of gone back and forth between recruiting and HR. Got my HR degree here from Davenport University in Grand Rapids, and I've really enjoyed aspects of both roles in talent management, pipelining, and then the HR side of things, really, getting tactical and getting hands-on in different positions. I've worked for smaller family-owned businesses, and I've worked for Fortune 500 manufacturers. So I joined the team here at Express as a recruiter in the skilled trades. Moved my way up to managing the business as the managing director of Express Employment Professionals, and then just recently moved over into an HR consulting role with Frontline.
Yeah, and as she was leading the Express Employment Professionals and Specialized Recruiting Group offices here in Grand Rapids, she was absolutely doing an incredible job, and we're so fortunate to have her on the Frontline team. But Nathan, maybe you could dive into a little bit of why it's so important to us to expand this HR lane here at Frontline.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people know Frontline Training Solutions for training because it's in our name, but we also do consulting, we do coaching, and we see this as a natural extension of what we've already been doing. We're working with human resources professionals a lot as decision makers on the training side, but we also have increasing expertise, including Kaylee, in the space of helping companies with HR-related projects and support. I think of a story just from today when Kaylee and I were talking with a potential client in South Carolina. She had reached out to us because she was interested in Supervisor Boot Camp, one of our core training programs, very, very popular. We're delivering it all over the country. And she wanted to talk to us about doing Supervisor Boot Camp on site at her location. There's a chance for us to understand better, how many people are we talking and what are some of the unique challenges that you're facing and all of that. In the middle of that conversation, she stops us, and after a couple of minutes, she says, Is it okay if I eat while we talk? And, we're, of course, totally fine with that. But I said, kind of joking, I get it. I know what it's like to be an HR leader. Your day is not really determined by what you put on your calendar. Your day is determined by the work that comes to you. You can be very reactive at times. And she was just squeezing her lunch in because she didn't have any other time to eat it. And so absolutely, we continue the conversation. Then she gets a phone call and she's like, I'm sorry, can you guys hold on a second? I need to jump on this call real quick. Absolutely. Again, we get it. We've been in that seat. We understand the challenges of just managing your day and all the various things that come at you as an HR professional. She has a few-minute conversation. She comes back on, and I jokingly say to her, I'm like, well, the only other thing that can happen now is that somebody's going to walk into your office and ask for you to do something or need you for something else. Ha, 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 ha. Keep our conversation going, and wouldn't you know it, 5 minutes later, that very thing happens. Somebody knocks on the door. She's being very polite. I'm talking. We're kind of going over a little bit related to Frontline in the class, but you can see her. She's talking to someone and whatever, and then she says, I'm so sorry. I really want to keep this conversation going. I have to talk to somebody internationally who's calling and needs me. And so that's the reality of human resources these days. You're bouncing from one thing to another thing to another thing, and you've got a lot of priorities. She was even toying around with the idea of building some training for her supervisors internally, I could probably put something together. I have no doubt that she has the capability to do it? Does she have the capacity to do it? And that's why
That's a big question. Yeah.
Frontline got into the whole HR consulting space in a more intentional way, is to increase the capacity of human resources in our client organizations. So it's just an interesting real-time story of why we need HR consulting, because HR has so many important responsibilities and there's a lot of things they can't get to without the right support and help.
That's so true. I think to sum it up, we see you.
Yeah.
We hear you because we are you.
That's right.
So let's talk about how Kaylee fits into that picture and her new role and some of the things that you're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple of different lanes that we've identified just organically with companies that are coming to us with questions and wanting more information. And so some of those things are employee handbooks saying, hey, we know this needs to be done. We're not getting to it. Can someone else get to this for us? And so certainly we help with those kinds of projects. And then a big thing that I feel like has been coming up lately is this idea of succession planning. And our philosophy is certainly that succession is not just for your key leadership roles. We believe that succession belongs to everyone and should be integrated into all roles. But getting that process going and identifying what that looks like is a pretty big undertaking. I just lost my thread.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And I would just add, consulting around onboarding. What does a good onboarding process look like? What about your interview process? Even before you're onboarding, you got to select and get the right people. So again, if an HR professional, or maybe there's direction coming down from above in your organization, hey, we really need to make sure that we update this or that related to an HR process. That's going to be a great place for Frontline to come along and help you as an HR professional. We are an extension of the team. Our job is to understand what you're looking for, what you need, and then to turn that into some practical solutions that can help. I think another thing that's been interesting to see is the people that Kaylee's been able to connect with. And, at first it's kind of like, hey, let's talk about some of your challenges. Maybe we're working on some projects. All of a sudden that phone is ringing because they just need a listening ear. Who is there to help an HR professional through some of the challenges that they're faced with? Maybe you're an HR professional who has HR because there's no other place for it to live in your organization. So you found yourself with HR, but you're really a finance person, or you're really an ops person, but somebody needed to do it. Having that kind of resource at your disposal is really, really important. And something it's been interesting for me to see Kaylee kind of get into those conversations and realize, man, HR just needs some support and help. It has been a very challenging function to be a part of for a long time, but I would say much, much more in the last 5 years.
No, that's so good. I love that you talked about, what you're seeing right now is the topic of succession planning, and then of course, onboarding and everything. What other trends or shifts are you seeing happening in the HR world, maybe from some of the clients that we're talking to, especially going into the rest of 2025 and beyond, into 2026 and beyond that?
I would say stepping into this role, I've made a point to connect with some HR thought leaders that I know locally just to say, hey, what's keeping you up at night? And a big thing that I am hearing is about recruiting and retention. So not just finding the right people, but how are we going to keep them and build around them and make it a long-term play? And retention has always been such a challenge. And I think what we identify is much of the time, retention ties right back to culture. And so if you have a situation in your culture that is keeping people from wanting to stay long term, it's always going to impact that retention. And companies are thinking about how can we build this in a way where we don't have to keep backfilling and backfilling. It was funny, we got a call actually yesterday from a company that they hired a new business manager and immediately turned that person over because it wasn't a great onboarding experience. Culturally, that person didn't really understand what their role was and how they fit. And they said, before we bring in another person, we need to fix what's going on here so that they can understand and we can, identify and address this issue. And I thought that was such an interesting phone call.
Yeah, this the HR function is uniquely positioned to understand the culture. So I love that you called that out. And I've been using this term lately that HR is a steward of culture. I don't believe HR owns the culture any more than one person can own the culture. I think culture is owned collectively in an organization. It's the norms that a culture operates under. It's the written and unwritten rules that people adopt and how they work with each other and what they value. And you can define some of that explicitly, but it's also what happens organically. And I think HR is uniquely positioned to watch and see what's happening, to look at the landscape and say, this is what's working, this is what's not working. I actually have seen this challenge happen over here as well. And so it might be more of a systemic issue. And I think increasingly too, business leaders are starting to realize the value of HR in helping them understand what's going on. Historically and for a long time, HR has kind of been this compliance function. Keep us out of trouble. Don't let us break any laws or rules or whatever. But they're starting to realize, no, they have much, much more to give. And one of the ways they do that is in helping a leader understand what's working in the culture and what's not. The really smart leaders are then going to say, okay, what do we do about it? They're going to listen to it and say, what are we going to do about it? But I just think HR professionals are wired to see the culture and try to understand what's working and how is it helping people succeed, live into their promise, live into their values and their aspirations, and how is it maybe getting in the way. And so I think HR needs to be able to continue to focus in that and can really help an organization move forward with those initiatives if they're listened to.
Oh, I really like that. So let's consider that HR professional is kind of monitoring the culture and noticing some of these things in their leaders. At what point would it be wise for an HR professional or an organization to partner with someone like us, to partner with someone like Kaylee?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think one of the things that we joke about with many of the HR leaders we know is, well, who do you call when you need HR as an HR professional? And one of the big answers I hear is that they usually have a really good network of HR folks that do the same thing they do and maybe have experienced it. But I'd say that we are well equipped between many members of our team who are sort of all over the board in different HR specialties to be able to walk alongside companies on their HR journey, kind of anywhere that they are.
Yeah, the thing that I think about is that a business leader, when an HR professional is going to come to the table with an idea, most of the time a business leader is going to want to know, what kind of benchmarking have you done? What is the market saying? Is this idea that you have around a new benefit that you want to offer, or a new training program that you think is good, or a new system, an HR system that you want to use? My experience has always been that executive leadership wants to know, how have you vetted this idea? And have you reached out to get input from others? And so to your question, like, when does it make sense to reach out? I think anytime you can, you should be thinking about your network and connecting with people, we'd love for that to be Frontline. We want to come alongside of you and be a sounding board and help you think through things and even help you implement and change things. But I think in general, it's best practice to get the perspective more broad than just your organization. Get out there and see, what are people saying? What are people asking for? How are people solving this problem? Because I think at some point your executive is going to ask you, like, okay, this sounds like a good idea. Is anybody else doing this? Because they've got this keen idea of, I don't want to go down a trail. I don't want to blaze a trail on this one. A lot of times you're blazing trail in HR space, that could be a challenge. So help me understand what the landscape looks like. Now, HR is pretty good at networking. We've got a lot of formal and informal networks. Here in the Grand Rapids area, we have AHRM and HRG, and of course, SHRM is a national organization, and there's a lot of places that you can go to get some of that external perspective. What we're wrestling a little bit with, and maybe is something, Kaylee, for you to expand a little bit on, is we're wrestling with how fruitful are those networking conversations at helping people actually make real, authentic connection and really wrestle with what's going on in HR. Like beyond, like, it's good to hear some presentations and breakfast with somebody or whatever, but are we getting beyond that surface and getting into some deeper conversations? I know that you've had some folks saying to you, hey, it'd be great if we could do a little bit more in that space.
Yeah, I would say industry specific is something that we're hearing requests for. So if someone works in a specific type of manufacturing, how do I meet HR people that are rising up against some of the same challenges that I'm rising up against? And how can we talk in the weeds about day-to-day operations and decision making? So Nathan and I have been kind of kicking around, what's a way that we can solve that problem? And I think something that's unique about how we're positioned is that we're integrated with so many different companies doing different things that we're in a great place to be connectors. And so we're certainly thinking about that, certainly thinking about what the value is of fresh eyes on a situation. It's funny, that individual we were speaking with earlier who was interrupted 4 times in a matter of half an hour, that's very much the day-to-day for an HR professional. And so figuring out the capacity and who do I need to pull in to make sure that something gets done and gets done well. And I think that we're able to lend a hand in that way with fresh eyes.
Yeah, Kaylee's been sitting in on our HR classes. One of the first things I did when I joined Frontline way back in 2022 was build out our 3-tiered approach to HR training. And I'm quick to say this is not employment law, labor relations. You get that from SHRM and other organizations that can keep up with all of that. This is about how do you build and sustain credibility at different levels of your career as an HR person, whether you're an individual contributor or you own the function. And so Kaylee's been able to sit in on some of these classes, which I've been really grateful for. But it's amazing to see the interest in the participants in staying connected. Like you spend 12 to 20 hours with each other in a training class, you start to build a relationship that goes to a deeper level. And there's some understanding of they've been there. They understand what it's like to be in your shoes. And boy, I just need somebody to talk to once in a while about this or that. So I think there's a deep desire in the HR world, especially, to focus on deeper connection and not just network for the sake of networking, but network in a way that's going to actually bring you support when you need it most, I guess.
Wow. So when we're thinking through, let's say there's a HR representative or individual contributor or someone who, like you said earlier, maybe should be more focused on finance, yet they've been placed in an HR role. What would you say are some common mistakes or pitfalls, or however we want to define that term? What's something that they should consider? I know we threw out networking. We threw out the need for, reaching out to someone like us for consulting services. Or maybe they're just even trying to figure out, how do I align closely with business objectives? How do I navigate this, and how do I help our company become an employer of choice? Like, what are some things that they should be thinking through? And maybe even take a step further, like, how can we help them with that?
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, I have a thought here, and I'm interested to know what Kaylee thinks as well. But people who are not naturally a part of HR, and also maybe don't have formal HR education or training, don't realize sometimes how important it is to create an environment where the organization is treating people equitably. Okay. So So what ends up happening is a leader might naturally have a little bit better connection with this person or better understanding of this function. And so they actually don't provide the same direction or consistent approach to managing challenging situations or difficult employees or whatever. It's certainly part of my learning and growth in HR. And I've told my story before. I have 20 plus years in human resources, but I found my way into HR because I was a training guy. I love training, and training lived in HR in the company that I was a part of. And then I got as HR manager multiple times. And I learned this as I went, where I was more naturally inclined to be like very situational and, oh, I guess we can do this in this situation and that in that situation. And that's not the HR world. HR is about consistency. So if you're not someone who's got that deep background in human resources, you may not be as inclined to see things as consistently. So let me tell you a quick story how this worked out for me. I was the director of total rewards at a cheese company in Wisconsin, and by extension, kind of responsible for the different rewards and recognition programs that were happening in different plants and across the facilities. We had 7 locations, about 1,200 employees. One of the biggest locations had done this huge initiative around developing an updated rewards and recognition process. They pulled in their leaders, they pulled in employees, they did everything that you would say you should do to create a good recognition program, and they were ready to launch it. And I'm sitting here going, well, good for you. This is really good initiative. Thank you for doing this. I'm 100% behind you. Total rewards director, kind of responsible for whether or not this goes forward.
Let's be honest. Did you say that that's a Gouda idea?
A Gouda? No. Gouda is not the kind of cheese we were making, but I do like the pun. So I was ready to move forward. The HR director, corporate HR director, was the one who said, time out. Have you shared this with the other plants? Right? And I'm sitting there going, dang it, I should have asked that question, because it's the right question. Because even though they're 200 miles away from each other or 100 miles away from each other, they talk to each other all the time. This good idea is going to percolate into other facilities. And what's the downstream impact of this? Why aren't we doing that here? Why can't we do this? That plant's able to do it. This isn't fair, blah, 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 blah. So my inclination was to be like really supportive and way to go, but I didn't think about how that might impact other parts of the organization. And this was even after 12 years in human resources or whatever. I was still learning that. And so I do think that is a symptom to watch out for if you're not a quote unquote natural HR person. Even if you are an HR person, are you seeing the connection between decisions that are being made and how they need to be applied within an organization? And try to drive a consistent approach so that you create an environment that supports the employees, nobody feels excluded or left out, and all that. And you think some people are very skeptical, like, oh, that'll never be the case. Well, you try your best. You try your best. You don't intentionally walk into a situation where someone is treated differently, or one plant gets to do something another plant doesn't get to do. So maybe more in the weeds than you were asking, Nick, but it's an example of the things that I learned. I had to figure out as an HR professional, and we can certainly help you think through that, because we'll definitely bring that mindset to any work that we would do.
It's funny that you mentioned that. My mind immediately went to employee experience when Nick was asking this question. And so for HR leaders who maybe don't have that HR background or just aren't close to the work that's being done at the location where they're responsible for the HR function, that's always going to be my first advice, is you need to connect with the people doing the work and you need to connect with the work. And once you learn, a little bit about what that experience is like, then you can start to integrate more of the HR sort of functionalities into, what you're doing every day. But I think that especially in manufacturing, I'll say that I have observed that HR sometimes gets a bad reputation for not knowing what it is that the manufacturing workers do. And so bridging that gap and being representative of the workforce and the workplace is a really pivotal strategic play for HR professionals.
Yeah, if you want to be recognized as a more strategic partner, learn about the business. And one of the other things we'll talk about is learn the language of business. And this is maybe more directed at pure HR professionals, but learn the language of business, which is numbers, finances, metrics, whatever you're supposed to be measuring to say whether or not you're successful. Talk like other business leaders talk. The more you kind of defer away from that or maybe talk more in stories or anecdotes, the less credibility you're going to build with your executive leader, and they're just going to see HR as that, well, I guess they're just there to make sure we don't get in trouble.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So let's say, we all know that HR should have a seat at the table when it comes to, strategic executive support. That's not always the case for everybody. How do you two see the HR role evolving into more strategic business partner? And if it's not, like, how should it?
It's a good question. One of the things that always comes to mind for me is that organizations that don't view HR, the function of HR as a strategic seat at the table, are going to get left behind. And one of the reasons I believe that is because there is so much changing all of the time with employment law, with everything happening, especially these last several years. If you don't have someone managing and owning that function strategically, I'm worried.
The demographic realities of just the talent market is unbelievably challenging. We've done a lot in that space in our webinars over the years. So you definitely are going to, I love that call out, you're going to be left behind if for no other reason because you're going to run out of people, because your organization hasn't figured out how to attract, retain, engage, and develop people. That should be a natural part of what human resources does. Now, other leaders can be wired for that as well. So it's not just HR that does that, but I think HR plays a really unique role.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And here at Frontline Training Solutions, we've done a couple webinars recently on the future of talent. It's just so eye-opening seeing the numbers, the demographics that, we know are coming down in the next, couple of years. We encourage you to go watch that webinar. And if you want to know more, please reach out to us. We can help you with that. But I'm curious, if someone is in this position and they're listening to us and they're hearing all the things that we're talking about, and maybe they're thinking, well, what am I going to do about it? Where do I start? We asked this question earlier about how, why would someone reach out to you, or like when should they reach out to you? So let's say, Kaylee, what would that look like? What would a good consulting onboarding look like, and what can they expect from working with you?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. I think from working with me, someone should expect to answer a lot of questions at the beginning. I'm very much someone that likes to know the information. I want to hear where people are at, what's keeping them up at night, what are they stressed about? Because generally, if you look to the pain points, it's going to tell us a bit of a bigger story as far as where to get started. But then, organizationally, there are always some things that we drive back to as far as what to look for. Again, one of those benefits of working with so many companies in a variety of sizes is that we see a lot. And HR is one of those functions where one size does not fit all. Different HR leaders in different organizations, different sizes, different accountability, experience very different things. So HR is really a one size fits one situation. So we like to diagnose, and we like to just have an honest discussion with HR leaders to say, how are you? Where are you? How can we best support you when we're getting started in consulting?
Yeah, and I would say part of another reason that we're excited for Kaylee to be on the team, and it's important that people are aware, she's a process person. She loves process. So part of her title is operational consultant, as well as she has a master's degree in lean manufacturing. So combining a very thoughtful, consultative approach to helping understand the issue with an eye to efficiency and creating processes to help, I would say, expand the capacity of HR. We started this conversation by talking about capacity. So I think what's so unique about Kaylee in this position is she's going to bring both those to the table. And, sometimes it's a process thing. Sometimes it's not. But a lot of the time in human resources, there's going to be some process that you can help build, design, come alongside of, improve, measure, monitor, all that good stuff to see if it's making an impact. And she's going to bring that business perspective to the conversation. So yes, you're going to get an HR professional with an HR perspective. She's also going to bring that business hat to help you elevate your HR credibility even more because of that combination.
I think we need to have a part 2 on the necessity for continuous improvement in an HR function.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it.
I could talk for days and days about that.
Yeah. That'd be great.
One of the things I always like to say when people ask me why I enjoy what I do or what I enjoy is that I love getting people and processes working in sync. And I think that a lot of the pain points we hear from HR people come from situations where people and processes are out of sync with each other. We're not moving in the same direction or at the same pace or even moving together at all. And so opportunities to help companies resolve that are always super fun.
I love that. Well, like I said earlier, we hear you, we see you, we are you. And we at Frontline Training Solutions, we're in a unique spot. We've talked about that. We're strategically positioned between the workplace and the workforce, between our partner companies with Express Employment Professionals and Specialized Recruiting Group, not just here in Michigan, but nationwide. And we hear what's going on in these companies. And so we're able to come with these challenges with the unique solutions that are tried, they're tested, and they work. And we want to connect you. If you want to know more about how we can support you in your HR function and your endeavors, and even just getting a seat at the table or increasing your capacity, whatever it may be, whatever is keeping you up at night, like Kaylee said, reach out to us. We want to connect you with Kaylee. We want to connect you with our team, and we want to help you get on the right way because we believe in developing people, inspiring growth, and unlocking potential. So thanks so much, Nathan. Thank you so much, Kaylee.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on the Frontline.